as a writer, I just wait for a signal from God, from a person, from something I read in the paper, from something that this is time to write the book. Joseph Campbell often says that writers today are the shamans of today. The artist is the shaman. That we must put our ear to the ground and listen. And I believe I am an intuitive person. And you don't know why it's time to write a book, this particular book, you just know it when you hear it. And when Clay Cable, who's the former mayor of Isle of Palms, my pal, my fishing mentor, and the vice president of the Shrimpers Association, he came over and he said, "Mary Alice, if you don't write that book about shrimpers pretty soon, it's going to be too late." And I kind of was electrified because I knew he was absolutely right. Because we'd all been reading in the newspapers about what a hard time the shrimpers are having. And I said, "Okay, Clay, it's time." He was my signal. You know, he wasn't going to let that drop. So I began my academic research, and I learned why shrimping has been such an endangered industry. Number one is the imported shrimp. There's been a glut of imported shrimp, mostly from Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam. I'd say that's where most of it's from, some from Mexico and some from South America, but mostly Southeast Asia. They refer to it as pond-raised shrimp. That means that they're raised in ponds, obviously, but they also use growth hormones and antibiotics to raise them. And of course, if you eat the shrimp, you're getting steroids and antibiotics and growth hormones. The other reason I'm again them, is because the leaching off from pond-raised shrimp has destroyed 37 to 40% of the mangrove forests. And the mangrove forests are the natural barrier of the coast, from coast to ocean. And it's been a real problem. They have been making strides to improve that, but it's still a real problem. But this huge glut of cheap labor makes the cost of shrimp so cheap here in the United States that restaurants and stores and people just buy it. So the shrimpers can't keep up. Number two, it's diesel fuel. You remember 2 years ago when I wrote this book, diesel fuel went through the roof, and I know I drive a diesel. But it can cost up to $3,000 for a shrimper to fill his tanks on a 50, 60-foot trawler. And now he cannot make that much money in a day. They call it making your day. He just can't make his day. And the third is lack of infrastructure. It used to be that, you know, coastline wasn't so expensive to have a dock on. Now, great homes, marinas, they're losing dock space, as well as they're losing their distributors. So it's just like a perfect storm of problems for the shrimpers. So I wrote this book, and we're going to talk about the fourth recent calamity in just a minute. When I wrote this book, I realized that, my gosh, the shrimpers in the last 30 to 40 years have gone from shrimp being king, captains going out and making good money, and their deckhands, which are called strikers, the strikers would sign on because they know they got a percentage of that catch and they make a good living. In the last 30 to 40 years, it's all dissipated. Now the captains are going out without strikers, without support. There are a lot of boats being just set up along the shore, docked for good. You go to the docks now, and you see for sale, for sale, for sale on most of the boats. They just can't go out. So I thought I was really electrified to write this novel because I wanted to write a story of the family before it was too late, before it was totally gone. I'm assuming most of us are from South Carolina here. You've gone to the coast. If you're from this area and you go and look at the coast, you expect to see that boat out on the water with its nets dropped. It's part of our coastal heritage. Paintings galore. Our artists love to capture that. It resonates inside of us when we see it, when the moon's out. I love this cover. When I saw this cover, it's, well, go Tigers. That was my first thought. But other than go Tigers, that could be what we see out on the water when we look out and see a shrimp boat at last light. And of course, first light and last light is, first light is dawn, when the shrimpers are allowed to lower their nets. They can't lower them before dawn. And then last light being sunset, when they bring them back up and they head back for home. And the shrimpers work long, long hours. I call them my saltwater cowboys. And that's what everyone calls them, actually, not just me. It's because they are rugged individualists. They are truly Southern cowboys. I just want to read the opening of the book. Excuse me. For 3 generations, the pull of the tides drew Morrison men to the sea. Attuned to the moon, they rose before first light to board wooden shrimp boats and head slowly out across black water. The heavy green nets poised like folded wings. Tales of the sea would whisper to them in their mother's laps. They earned their sea legs as they learned to walk, and they labored on the boat soon after. Shrimping was all they knew or ever wanted to know. It was in their blood. And this is what's really important to understand about the shrimpers. When you're talking about getting a land job so that they can feed their wives and children, it's like taking a horse away from a cowboy. This is what they want to do. This is their 3rd, 4th generation. So it's a heartbreaker to see when they can no longer stay on the water. Wives will work 1 or 2 jobs just to help the husband keep the boat on the water. They have this faith that they just hang on. 1 more day, they can make it. So I gathered up all this information. I got my interviews. Oh, let me tell you, I don't know, give me this sign when I'm running short. I can talk to you ladies all afternoon. I have so many stories. Getting the interviews for most stories is really just me volunteering and getting involved. But this was going to be different. I couldn't just become involved as a shrimper. I had to meet them and let them let me on the boats. So I went down to Shem Creek first, dressed sort of the way I am now. My shoes matched my purse. You never saw mouths zip so fast as they did when I showed up. Just zip, zip, zip. No one wanted to talk to this lady. Why would we talk to you? That was the expression I was getting on her face. I was shunned, and I was intimidated. These are big, burly guys. They're tough. The strikers are really, really tough. And so I went home and I said to Clay, I said, Clay, no one's talking to me. You know, how can I get the story? And to be honest with you, I wasn't really sure I wanted to get the story anymore. I was a little afraid that maybe this was a story that wasn't meant for me, that maybe Carl Hyacin would do a much better job of the story than I could. And if he did do a story on shrimpers, it would be a very different story than I wrote, I'm sure. So Clay introduced me to Georgia Tisdale in McClellanville. So down I went to McClellanville. Has anyone been to McClellanville here? Oh, good. Isn't it a gem of a community? It's exactly as I wrote. It's a town that time forgot. It's charming, and in all honesty, it's one of the last shrimping villages that remains intact along the Atlantic seaboard. Most of the others have scattered. There are a couple, but few with the charm of McClellanville. And so I knew that this was where the story was going to take place. And I met Georgia Tisdale, and I tell you, whenever I need to get the information, I always go to the women.